So we did one for Winters, and now that Spring Championship is over, I figured it's time we do another Legend tier list. I'm not really too sure how much different this is going to be from my Winters one, although I think that there could be some opinions change, especially given now we've seen Europe play on a new patch with the Legends. So we're just going to start with Thatch, we're going to end with Reno. Let's get into it. Okay, we're already starting off with a heater. I'm going to put Thatch in A. I think D-Light and Sig on blasters is really good. I think that given you can put him on strength stance and have 8 strength with him, I also think that's super good. The weapon combination is really good. The only thing that holds this guy back is the fact that he is 3 defense. Even 4 defense, you know, that's okay, but I don't think you should be overly concerned about that. If you're playing Thatch, just go all out, except that he is a glass cannon and play him like that. Now, Ada, I'm going to put Ada in B tier. 3 defense like Thatch, but I don't really think she's as good as Thatch. I think the Spear Sigs are really solid. I think the Gun Sigs are also pretty strong, but it's just, I don't know. Ada, to me, is a question of why would you necessarily pick Ada? I mean, if you play a lot of Spear, then I think it's really good, but also the blasters, the Blaster D-Sig feels like a big waste of time, usually. It's just like, that Sig might as well not exist. But yeah, there's not too much to really say about Ada, especially since no one's really playing her. Already, S tier. Freebie, really. I think Sentinel is just super good. He got buffed in the last patch. His Sigs did do pretty low damage, but I think it should have had corresponding force nerfs. I don't understand why they just gave the raw, like, damage buff. If you've ever played against the Sentinel, I don't really think I need to say too much. Hammer, really great for killing. Katars are just super strong in general. And then the signature kit with both the weapons just complements him really well. I'm going to say Lucian's a B. And remember, like most of my tier lists, I don't really order them unless I say something about it. I'm saying Lucian's a B. Katars are really good. Blasters, though, aren't doing anything super special. His Katar kit's amazing, but his Blaster kit also did get hit a while back. So kind of relying on blasters to kill isn't the best thing in the world with him. I will say, though, the stats, they are really good, and the weapon combination is pretty good as well, and that's what mainly carries him. Other than that, though, I think there are better choices right now, which is why he's kind of like, he's not bad, you know, he's not average, he's just a little above it. The Bull, Taros, gonna put him in A tier. I think he's solid, but I think he's pretty exploitable, especially when you're playing some of the legends that I consider to be better than him, like in the S tier. Other than that, I mean, just he hits really hard. He's super simple. It's just both the weapons are slow. The stats are pretty good, especially with the weapons. He's good in 1s, 2s. Yeah, just heavy hitter, really good. Some might debate this, but I'm also going to put Brynn in A. I think ever since they did nerf Brynn D-Sig, which was a big part of her play. If you ever played against a Brynn, you're going to know, especially like the higher level, they really utilize D-Sig well. And now that it's not doing 40 damage, that's a pretty big change. And I think Brynn does have a really strong kit overall on both Spear and Axe. It hits super hard. But again, I don't know. I just haven't been playing against a lot of Brynn, so it's kind of hard for me to say if she's still like extremely good in S. I just think that there are some matchups that you can exploit her with, although she does make up for it with really solid stats and super strong Sigs. Now, this one I'm kind of going to rank, not really. I'm going to say Asuri's higher end of the A tier. I'm not doing like A+, A-, that stuff. I'm not going to do like grades in between. So I will say, though, Asuri is like higher end of A for sure. I don't think Asuri is as good as Sentinel. I think a Sentinel having that disparity, like, you know, with Hammer being able to kill and the Sigs honestly being overall better, I think it's really, really good. And Asuri is just a step below. The Sigs aren't nearly as strong, just overall. And then Sword is easy, but also, again, the Sigs there aren't super good either. And then the stats, they're pretty balanced. I don't think there's too much to say about them. Asuri, though, she's just like that base level Katar character. If you don't know where to start, you should just play her. Okay, so Barraza has a bit of a conditional. I'm going to say Barraza is like towards the lower end of A. Barraza, to me, he's very exploitable, and I play with a Barraza player a lot, right? So I've kind of heard the sentiment that Cody feels about certain matchups, and it's true. Barraza is like Taros, where there's certain matchups, you know, Katar's, Sword, Spear, where if you can just get on the inside of the legend, then it's pretty detrimental to the character himself. I will say, though, I think the Sigs are really strong on Barraza, and I think he's an insane 2v2 legend specifically. It's just that if you play the right character into him, then it's going to be a lot harder for that Brawlhalla player to do anything. Even if the stats are good and the weapons themselves have some strong signatures and he can kind of kill, you know, he's going to be A still, but there are some like matchups that can really hurt. Now, although Ember is a 3 defense legend, it's pretty easy to just like bump her stats up and make her basically a 4 defense legend. With that being said, Bow is extremely good right now. Katars are extremely good right now. Both of the weapons have really good SIGs. I can't talk about this character without mentioning Bow and SIG specifically. That's basically its own weapon. It doesn't hit super hard, it just covers such a range, and also side SIG on Bow as well is really, really strong. This is a character that if you play it well, it's going to exceed in 1s. 2s, maybe. I feel like this is a character that's kind of limited to 1 game mode. I don't want to say that because you can make any character work in any game mode, right? But I think Ember's really strong. It's just that, you know, stats, 3 defense, not the best thing in the world. I'm going to say Azoth is a high A, like a Suri. I think his signature kit, amazing. I think his stats, really good. He can be a great legend in 1s and 2s. I will say, even though he does have Bow, Axe at the end of the day is Axe. And a lot of what's strong right now, this is going to be like a thing I repeat a lot. It can get countered. Like, you know, Val is a great example. Val has gauntlets and sword. And into characters like Taros, like Barraza, like Azoth, I think Val can do exceedingly well. Even though I think Azoth has one of the most disgusting kits in the game. I didn't have to think about this guy too much. I think right now, Bodevar is an S tier legend. In the most recent patch, they nerfed D-Light D-Sig, so... Oh, well, they nerfed D-Sig, so you can't do D-Light D-Sig as consistently. It's a lot more jumpable now, which was, like, a big point I made in previous videos when I've talked about Bodevar. Hammer, Sword, just one of the best weapon combinations you could really ask for. The SIGs are still super strong. The stat spread... You might as well run him on 7 strength, right? You're not losing anything when you take away his dex. So he has the stats, he has the SIGs, and he has a great weapon combination. Back-to-back S-tier characters. Even though Koji actually got like some damage nerfs to his kit, I don't think that really took away too much from him. I don't know if he got force hit at all, but the signature kit on like Sword especially is still super strong. And Bow kit as well. I mean, you have Bow D-Sig, like, you give him the plank, that thing's ridiculous, and Bow is just really good, and Sword's just really well-rounded. The stats aren't super great, but I think if you're gonna play a legend that has higher dex, he's one of the choices to have. You can take away dex, and, you know, it'll put it in defense, and then he's 5'7", 5'5", so it's, you know, it's pretty good. Great in both game modes, and I think he's earned his stay for the moment, S. You know what? Ulgrim has had it rough in the past couple of months. They made his N-Sigs not hit grounded anymore on either of his weapons. The stats, I will say, are very good, right? But that took away a lot of the character, and then Lance got hit. Axe has been the same. You know, both the weapons, they're pretty easy to use. He's kind of like Taros, but I honestly would argue that he's basically a worse Taros in current meta. It just doesn't really make much sense to play him over Taros unless you're really dedicated to Lance. Now, that's not saying he doesn't have his moments. Like, his signature kit overall is still really, really good. I just think he's not average or bad. He's just, again, he's like Lucian. It's kind of like, oh yeah, you could play him, and he's all right. You know, he's a step above being just mediocre. But there are better options like Taros. So they nerfed Diana a little bit. They nerfed her N-Sig. And you can tell when it, like, used to kill and situations that it now doesn't. Blasters, again, I think if Blasters were slightly better, if Blasters had just like one thing that people were like, oh yeah, this is like really, really good, right? Like some sort of combo or some string that was just kind of crazy, she would be a freebie S tier. I think her bow is still possibly one of the best in the game, if not the best. And then her gun kit is also really solid. The stats are there as well. It's just that, I don't know, Diana definitely is sitting in high A. Don't have a lot to say about Jala. Jala's a glass cannon type character. Similar properties to Thatch, right? The signature kit overall on the character is super strong. So if you're looking for a glass cannon type of legend, I think Jala's a good place to start. Possibly one of the most sleeper legends right now. Core is just, he's an S tier legend. Gauntlets are super strong. His gauntlet kit and hammer kit are pretty ridiculous. You can do D-Light N-Sig on hammer still. And then the gauntlet kit, you have D-Sig, which is just crazy. It's like Sentinel D-Sig, but it just blasts them in the sky. You have N-Sig, just an insane spike for a Gauntlet Sig. And then you have Side Sig, just, you know, a straight up throw. He has a couple crossovers too, but I'm not really going to mention those too much. And the stat spread's also really strong. So this character shines, and it's not just because he's bald. I think it blows me away, really, that this guy has not been nerfed. And it feels like I'm the only guy really playing him a lot of the time. Shang is just best spear in the game. He has like the optimal stats for both of his weapons. And his gauntlet kit, maybe you could say it's the best in the game. I don't know. But yeah, this guy, he's made it through patches time and time again. And I'm just blown away that he has not been nerfed at all. If you watched the EU Spring Championship 1v1s, then you know Val is another easy S. The N-Sig on this character, the fact that it made it through the patch, and the only change that happened was that they nerfed the D-Sig from like 35 damage to 28, which I think it needed to be nerfed. That's kind of weird for it to do that much damage. But they didn't touch N-Sig is a bit mind-blowing to me. You know, even if they nerf N-Sig, this character still has overall a really good kit. Gauntlets, sword, the sword side sig alone, on certain maps you can completely just control the edge with it, right? The side sig over edge on like Demon Island, Crystal Temple, those two maps are like freebies for Val as far as edge guarding goes. And then you also have like the wall version, and you can do some weird things with like gravity canceling over edge to like shorten the animation, and it will come out like really fast on side sig. Gauntlets, I mean, Gauntlet side sig's pretty strong. Gauntlet D-Sig I find useful, especially if like you catch him with no dodge, right? You can usually get like a recovery off of it. And then this character basically has Kaya stats if you're going to take away a dex. So you're going to be running 4 strength, 4 dex, which you might feel on sword. I know I do. Gauntlets you're not going to notice at all. And then 7 defense and 7 speed, which is just ridiculous. I mean, you're high end on both of the stats that really matter. And that's a big reason what makes her super good aside from the N-Sig. I think out of all the Qatar legends right now, I think Ragnir is pretty underappreciated. And I know I've said, oh, okay, you know, Diana and Asuri are high A. I'm going to say Ragnir is actually like a low S. I think Ragnir really has a super solid Qatar kit. Yeah, they nerfed him in the past patch, right? They buffed his side sig on Qatars, but I haven't noticed it too much. And then I think it was side sig on Axe that got nerfed as well on stage and off stage. You might notice it a bit, especially if you hit it on stage, but I still think he has like certain properties. Like N-Sig on Axe is just crazy. I think the Qatar kit overall is very well rounded, and almost in some ways I find him to be a bit of an alternative to Sentinel. Maybe not as strong, that's why I say he's low S, but the stats are there, right? The weapon combination I think it's pretty good. You might have a little trouble killing with like Axe versus Hammer, but the SIGs still exist on both the weapons. They're really good, and I think he's a bit of a sleeper pick. This is a character that's so hard to judge because there's such a lack of play on him. The only time I've seen this character played is Cody, but Cody hasn't even really played him in tournament, and then Boomy. And when Boomy's played him, we see how broken this character can look. I'm going to say this character is going to join Asuri and Diana, and, you know, he's higher A. Because, like, the Gauntlet kit is just, it hits so hard. Gauntlet N-Sig might be the hardest hitting Sig in the game. I'm not, like, 100% on that, but it definitely feels like it nowadays. The Blaster kit overall is pretty good, and I think the weapon combination right now is actually really strong. And then the stats, he's a character you can drop down to 3 decks, and you're not really going to notice it a ton, especially on Gauntlets. So I think that, you know what, we'll say Cross is high A. Probably the most basic Scythe legend. I think that Mirage, given how the SIGs are, right? Both of the D-SIGs just completely cover you, and they have decent forts, especially the Scythe D-SIG. She's just a solid A character. I mean, Spear and Scythe may not be a combination a lot of people really like to play, but the stats are there. They're pretty strong. And if you want like a basic Scythe character to play that you can maybe play in 2v2s especially, I think this is a good character to look at. The SIGs have a lot of force. They're not super complicated, right? They're not like specific hitboxes. They're straightforward. They do what you think they're going to do, and she's pretty good. So Cassidy, it depends how much you value speed, right? And depending on how much you value one game mode over the other. If you're a 2s player, Cassidy is going to seem like one of the best legends in the game, for sure, especially blaster-wise, right? Hammer kit's ridiculous. Really low speed, which takes a lot away from her. But then the Hammer kit and Blaster kit is just super strong, and she's just like built for 2s basically. You know, she's like a rock in 2s. I will say though, I'm going to say Cassidy is low A. If you've seen, I think a prime example of like Cassidy gameplay in ones is Cake versus Boomy at BCX 2019. Possibly one of the most insane showcases I've ever seen of a legend specifically. Ensig is just absolutely free. The low speed didn't even look relevant when I saw Cake play the character. And blasters are blasters. You know, they're okay. I don't really know. It's hard to say. One might say Cassidy isn't S tier because the 2v2 gameplay and the SIGs. One could say she's B because she's just so slow and that takes away so much from her. But I think we might as well settle for a bit of an in-between, although I will say she's definitely on the lower side of A. So the conditional with Nyx is that Nyx is definitely one of the harder legends to play. However, if you can play Nyx well, Nyx is going to shine so much. I think Nyx is an A tier legend with S tier SIGs and stats. And weapon combination, nah, not really, but the SIGs are just ridiculous for this character, right? You have like a sniper shot for Ensig on Scythe, like just a freebie SIG to throw out. And then D-SIG and Side SIG both have a lot of force behind them. I think Ensig on Blasters is really, really good, and the rest of the kit, D-SIG on Blasters too, is pretty strong. Side SIG's kind of whatever, but it has the force to back it up. And then the stat spread, it's just really rewarding. You have really high defense, you can have really high speed, and then you're going to have lower force, but you have Scythe, and you have SIGs that hit super hard, so it doesn't really matter at all. The conditional, as I said in the beginning, is that if you're not playing the character well, this character is probably going to feel like a B tier legend or worse. But given what I mentioned, it's going to be a solid spot in A. Probably the most deserving out of all Scythe characters to go in this tier. Mortix is a pretty easy S. I mean, he has solid stats, right? He has great SIGs overall. They have active input, and they all have a purpose, and they're all super strong. His Scythe kit, I remember when I made a video, the best legend for every weapon, I said that Mortix's SIGs, they really intertwine with Scythe's kit really, really well as far as doing reads and stuff. So I think that's a big reason why he's holding a spot in S. So if you can play Scythe pretty well, and if you can, play Gauntlets pretty well, you're going to just have a legend that's able to roll a lot of people. Again, the question is, are you going to be able to play both those weapons, specifically Scythe, at that level? It's up in the air. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But I think overall, he's good enough to where that's not really that relevant, and he has a spot in S. So I'm putting Yumiko in B for broken because her D-SIG over Edge does just not work. If that SIG worked over Edge, I honestly think she'd be probably an A, maybe S even. The stats aren't astounding, right? I know a lot of you guys probably disagree with this, but yeah, I don't know, man. No one's playing Yumiko. I think Yumiko is really good, don't get me wrong. But it just annoys me that the D-SIG over Edge has not been fixed. So the only reason I'm putting her in B is because B, broken, B, it just makes sense. I wish it was fixed. If it was fixed, I'd easily put her in like high A. No doubt in my mind right now. The rest of the kit is really good. I think she's just a cool character overall. It's a shame we don't see more play of her. But yeah, BMG, just fix this character, please. Even though Lance has been nerfed, the SIGs have been buffed of this character, and I don't think the character really needed that sort of buff. The stats, you can run 9 speed with taking away a dex, and it's just like, why wouldn't you on a legend like Artemis? High speed Scythe and Lance just seems incredible, especially with the SIGs that this character has. The only reason I even played this character, even the only reason why I touched Lance, was because the SIGs on Lance are so incredibly broken. Side SIG alone carries this character on Lance, and then you have N-SIG and D-SIG. D-SIG actually has really good force and a pretty strong angle, and then N-SIG, I think a lot of people underrate. It's just a straight up ball. Like, you just throw that ball and then they get shot to the moon. The Scythe kit, you can do Sidelight N-SIG if they have no dodge. It's a pretty good option for Scythe, especially since there's not really a good kill combo on Scythe. There are no like combos to kill on Scythe. Side SIG is really fast on Scythe, although it is like it has a lot of like active frames, but that doesn't really matter in 1 specifically. In 2s, you could say that's a bit of a problem. D-SIG though does not have that problem. D-SIG's great on stage, it's great off stage, and it has a just boatload of force that really doesn't make sense for a legend with 5 force. I feel like I'd be discrediting this legend if I put him in B as much as I want to, but Katars and Gauntlets are just so good. The issue is he has Katars and Gauntlets, and not many people are wanting to play those 2 weapons together. They keep buffing him, and he's pretty undeniable when it comes to SIGs. They're super strong. They all hit really hard. His stats are actually pretty good. It's just that no one really cares about playing both those weapons at the same time, right? A lot of people, they want to have like gauntlets and swords, so they play Vow, or they want to have hammer and katars, so they play Sentinel. And people know that both those legends are really good, so it's kind of like, okay, why am I wasting time playing, you know, 2 short-range weapons on Caspian, even though he has incredible SIGs, even though he has incredible weapons? It's just one of those things where he's going to be ignored because the options are better, even though he is an insane option himself. Just like Caspian, Sidra is kind of forgotten. I think Sidra is A tier. I think Sword and Cannon goes really well together, right? It's hard to say nothing with Sword like is a bad combination, or anything with Sword's a bad combination, because Sword just is so simple. The Cannon, really, the Cannon N-Sig is what makes her Cannon kit, I think. Cannon D-Sig I actually think is pretty good as well. The stats are super strong, and then the Sword Sigs, excuse me, the Sword Sigs I think are pretty undervalued, right? People know that D-Sig is super good, and it's like really hard to punish, especially as a recovery option off stage. But then, you know, the side sig on Sword's okay, and I think the end sig on Sword's actually really good. It's just a legend we don't see much of aside from the Ninja and EU, and then Sandstorm played it in 2s for a bit, actually in Winters, and, you know, he made use of it, but at the same time, I feel like the next legend, honestly, is what a lot of people I think would rather play right now. I've thought this for a while, and I know he got a couple buffs in the latest patch. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I think, I'm going to say, I think Zol is just a better pick maybe than Sidra. Maybe you know, maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I'm just like the stupidest person in the world. But I think with a Cannon specific legend, right, or Cannon in general, having really high force is super good, or really high strength is just super good, because Nair now is a pretty good tool, and also just being able to catch him with 1 string and do that little bit more extra damage is also really good. I think this is possibly the best 2s pick as far as Cannon goes. In 1s, again, I would say he's kind of in that same area that like Taros is in, where there's certain characters like Vow who can just kind of shut him down a bit, but he hits really hard. Certain SIGs like Cannon D-Sig over Edge I think is really, really strong, and then just like all that strength, man, is actually really, really good. So Kaya's just going to be thrown right in the mix. Right now, Spear's pretty strong. Bow, really good. We know this, right? Well, then you add the stats. Kaya's stats, really, really good, especially current meta. And then you add the SIGs, which a lot of them don't make sense for a 4-dex legend, especially Bow and SIG. It's so fast and it hits so hard. It is really weird that she didn't get nerfed at all, at least in that area, right? I don't really know what else you'd nerf on her, maybe aside from D-Sig on Spear. D-Sig on Spear is another, yeah, that carries. Bow and SIG carries, and then Bow D-Sig really carries like the rest of that weapon's kit. I think she's possibly one of the best 2s legends in the game. I don't want to say the best, because you have characters, right? You have your Bodevars, you have your Shangs. There's other options that are really, really good. But I will say, if you're a Bow player and you're like, okay, I can't play any other weapon, but I want to play Bow in 2s, then look to Kaya. I think Kaya is super valuable. And again, it's kind of weird that I'm one of the only people playing this legend, at least in 2v2s. Now, in 1s, I will say, with a disclaimer, that Kaya in 1s I don't think is that great unless you're willing to play a lot more of like a patient play style. The low dex doesn't feel great on either of the weapons. You're kind of missing out on a few things, like Sarah Enlight on Spear. I really value that, and I also just don't like the extra recovery frames on Bow and Spear. So it depends what you value, but I think Kaya, especially when it comes to 2s, is really an easy S tier pick. This legend is just a culmination of just kind of, I don't know, it's like of what could be, really, right? Cannon. If Cannon was really good, then he'd be a lot higher. Blasters. If Blasters were really good, they'd be a lot higher. But both of those weapons, I think Cannon, you know, has explosive potential and can get damage. I think Blasters, you know, Blasters can get damage pretty easy. And I think the SIGs, he has some amazing SIGs. But then also, he has like Cannon side SIG or like Blaster side SIG. They're just kind of like ones where I'm like, specifically Cannon side SIG, where I'm just like, this thing is bad. It takes away from him so much. And then the signature, or not signature kit, the stats are all right. I don't think the stats are out of this world. They're pretty like mediocre, if anything. It's just that it would be weird to have him in A when I have like Zol, Sidra, and then later on, you know, we'll talk about the other Cannon characters, but it would just feel weird to put him in the same tier as those. All right, guys, I've hated on this legend far long enough. He's S tier. I'm gonna be honest. He's S tier. Nah, I'm actually lying to all of you. This guy's still D tier. I'm not going to say anything's an F tier pick, right? Because you can play anything in the game and get away with it at the end of the day. But Jiro, why would you ever touch this legend? Low defense, right? He has something on Scythe that's pretty good. His signature kit just doesn't make any sense on Sword in particular, right? His signature kit, he might as well be on steroids. It doesn't make any sense why a 5 strength legend has this much force in his sword kit. And then his Scythe kit's just like mediocre. They all look cool, so I'll give him that, right? Like if you play him, you're probably playing him because it's like, oh wow, this guy's like, you know, just a cool shadow clone, like purple Sigs, whatever. He summons like these like ninjas. Other than that, it just, why? If you're gonna play him, I honestly think you should play him for the sword, just because the Sigs hit so unreasonably hard. But this is a guy I would like to see very heavy changes to when it comes to the Sigs in particular, and then I would be willing to argue if the Sigs made more sense to me, just in how they flow and how they work, and maybe they would feel more like a high dex character Sigs instead of, you know, like Zol Sigs with how they hit on sword specifically. So maybe if they make changes, I would probably bump him up to A if they were the right changes, but until then, it's just, he's a weird character. He's cool, but he's weird in every other area. I'm going to say Orion's going to join the ranks of the high A-tier club. This character has just incredible spear kit. They did nerf it with Sidesick having like a smaller range for like activation, right? You can't be like super far away and it will like hit them. You actually have to be pretty close for it to hit. Like it's going to be like, the hitbox is like right on the body. And then the Lance kit's still, I think, possibly the best in the game. Lance Ensig is a cannon. That thing is so strong, and I think way less punishable than people realize. D-Sig, especially over Edge, is great, and then Side-Sig is kind of undervalued. If you watch someone like Stingray, he's really the only representation we get with Orion, and I think he does a good job at showcasing what exactly this legend is super good at. So the question with Lin Fei is, how much do you value the fact that she has super bad stats, if I'm being honest? I mean, Katars benefit from really high dex, and Cannon, I don't really know if it benefits from high dex at all. I will say, she has stats, I think, that have... It represents the Sig kit very well, right? You look at Cannon Ensig. Cannon Ensig's incredible. And honestly, some of like the Katar Sigs too. Though all the Sigs are pretty good, but Cannon Ensig in particular, it's super fast. It hits pretty hard, maybe a little harder than it should. I'm not entirely sure about that. But if like Jiro... I'll say this. If Jiro had stats that were kind of like... Or Sigs that were kind of like Lin Fei's, I think he would be in a lot better of a position. But I will say, at the end of the day, the stats hurt Lin Fei so much that I don't think it's necessarily gonna allow her to get into like A tier, even though I think some of the Sigs are very good, and I think individually the weapons are also pretty strong. So I'm gonna say this. There's this issue with Zariel, right? And the issue is that all the Sigs have this tendency to be pretty inconsistent, and you never know when they're gonna drop. I think they've done some fixes. I don't know how much it's helped. So I would say there's two spots you could put Zariel, right? You could say, oh, that's really bad. Her Sigs can drop at any point. So you're gonna put them in C, right? That's fair. But at the same time, you know what? I think the weapons, the stats, and I think the Sigs, when they don't drop, are very good. So I will like base my pick of Zariel. I'll say I'm putting Zariel in A when we're assuming that the Sigs aren't going to drop. But that's not necessarily super realistic. If Zariel's Sigs never drop, this would be just an easy A. But yeah, I think there's two options here, right? You can say there's C because of it, or you can say, you know what? If they're not dropping too often, if you get that good RNG, then it's just a solid A tier character. Out of all the characters in S tier, I think this is the guy that's just stupid. Like, you see him in S tier and you're like, I mean, it makes sense. But it's like, it's so corny, bro. That's the only way I can describe Rayman, right? You have D-Sig over Edge with Axe, and you're like, you know what? I know they're going to do it, but then you still get hit by it because it's just so fast and it hits so hard that it's borderline unreactable. The rest of the kit is really, really good. The Gauntlet Sigs, I think, are also pretty underrated, and the stats are extremely good. I think he's a really good 1s or 2s pick. Maybe better in 2s, given, Gauntlets and Axe. But I think even in 1s, that this type of character is just going to see success if he's played well, no matter what. And yeah, I mean, dude, it's just Rayman. It's just stupid. One could say that Dusk has the worst Orb Sigs, and one could say that Dusk has maybe the worst Orb character stats. I don't know. I think that the stats are honestly, they're whatever, right? They're not like fantastic or anything, but they're not like horrible. Decent speed. You can have them actually pretty high strength, and then defense is 4, so that's not terrible either. He did get pretty big buffs though with like Orb Ensig, Orb Sidesig, and Orb Dsig. They actually might have buffed one more. I think they actually buffed Spear D-Sig, but that's really the only like Sig that you can look at and just be like, this Sig is terrible. It is awful. It is so bad. And even with that being said, I actually think the Sig's okay. I don't think it's fantastic, but if that Sig was better, then the whole kit for this guy when it comes to signatures would just be completely insane. Spear, Orb, it's a pretty good combo. I mean, both the weapons are pretty strong. Orb in particular is super strong. And then all his SIGs, they're like very, like they're like pinpoint hitboxes. They're not super big and like clunky, for example. Like I would say like Fate is a good example of that, right? Where the hitboxes of the SIGs are super big on Orb and they have a lot of force. This guy has small hitboxes for the SIGs, but they all hit extremely hard. And so if you can place them and you can find certain areas, you're going to be getting some insanely early kills with the Legend. And as I mentioned, Fate, talking about Dusk, Fate, I think, is the best orb in the game still, even though she has been nerfed in previous patches. And then also Scythe. I think I really undervalue the Scythe on this character. Side Sig's really good. D-Sig was buffed. I think it is a bit better now. I don't think it's, like, incredible. It's still probably, like, the worst Sig on her entire kit. With that being said, though, is it really that bad? Probably not. Ensig also is really, really good, really fast, and hits pretty hard. If you're going to be able to play Scythe well, Orb is going to do its thing, right? Orb's not entirely that hard to play. It takes a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you're playing the Scythe well and your Orb's doing pretty good, you're going to have SIGs to back it up, you're going to have stats to back it up, and you're going to just have a completely ridiculous Legend in your hands. This Legend's weird to me because after BCX 2019, everyone was playing Thor, like, up until that tournament. And then after that tournament, people stopped. I don't know why people stopped playing this character. This character's so good. I think he's, out of all the Orb characters, he might be the least talked about. He's not the least played. I think, like, Dusk is still going to take that title. But he just doesn't get talked about that much. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, Thor. Like, right? Thor's there. He got nerfs a while back. I don't think he's had really any changes as of late. But the guy's so good. He's a monster in 2v2. And then in 1v1s, if you're a Hammer player, I think Orb and Hammer being put together is still super good. I think I just think he's a solid choice if you're looking for an Orb option as a Hammer player, or you're an Orb player who struggles to kill, so you have Hammer right there. I've only seen 2 people really play this character. We've had Boomy a lot in 1s, most recently the Winter Championship, and then Cody actually has played this character a decent amount in 2s, or he's played in specific scenarios. And I will say both times when you watch like those guys use this Legend, Petra's just off the wall. Petra, I think, is the best gauntlets in the game. The Orb kit, some people like to say I think the Orb kit's not even that good. I think the Orb kit's fine. It's not like, you know, it's not ridiculously broken. That's not the highlight. But when you have a gauntlet kit that's that good, it's kind of hard to like compare the Orb kit, right? It's just, there's levels to this, and like the gauntlet kit being possibly the best in the game, yeah, obviously the Orb kit's probably not going to be at that same level. So the stats also back up this Legend pretty well. This character can get in 1s and 2s. Probably good until just about, I think, every matchup. I can't really think of any matchup in particular that this Legend's going to be like bad for. Also, I will say, out of all the Legends, I think right now, I think Petra probably can be played the most aggressively, given how often you can just kind of throw out the SIGs, how hard they hit, and just the weapons that she has. I think this Legend has the potential to be one of the best in the game. I will say, though, I think that Lance's current state holds him a little bit back, maybe. I think the bow kit is crazy. I don't think people realize how good it is just because not many people play him. And when they do play him, you know what they do? They do, like, GC Ensig on the wall, and they complain about how bad, like, D-Sig is on Lance, which it is very, very bad. But I think they miss some of the good things about Vector, or they just, like, don't understand how good other parts of him are. And if his D-Sig gets buffed, which it probably will on Lance, then I think it would be arguable that he goes in S tier maybe, but I'm going to say for now, Vector's A, just because Lance's current state. Other than that, though, the bow is incredible, and Lance, like, you know, Lance can do its thing, and the Lance Sigs are also pretty good. I think right now the advantage you're going to have with Vector is the fact that no one really knows how to play against him or what to expect. So he'll be a good legend to pick up just based on that fact alone. So I'm going to have maybe a bit of a hot take with Volkov. The only reason that I feel like people would even consider him to be anything but S are his stats. And with that being said, right, you could just play Strength Stance. He's going to have 4 speed. He's kind of like a Cassidy scenario, but with like Scythe and Axe. The Signature Kit just doesn't make sense. I mean, they're really good. They hit really hard. And the Axe ones especially, I think, are really fast. And they do cover like a good amount of space. I think the weapon combination also is pretty good. I think this legend can maybe take a little more effort than others to play. But you know what? Just for the sake, because I'm going to consider the fact of how good he is in 2v2s, I'm going to say that he is lower end S. I think that people harp on the fact that his signature, or well, his stats are just not that great. And so, you know, they're like, oh, they just completely throw him out, right? If you can deal with the stats, he is just crazy, right? Axe isn't at its peak, but also I will say that, you know, I'm not going to say Scythe is at its peak, but if you can play Scythe well, he's going to shine, and you're going to have a great signature kit to back it up. So, Onyx, it kind of depends on where you're valuing Cannon right now. I'm not going to say Cannon's like, oh, Cannon's this broken weapon. It definitely does have some certain things that are really good. Onyx, though, is the best Cannon in the game. I truly believe that. And then also, I think that the stats of Onyx are very, very good. And taking away a dex on Onyx so you have an extra speed and you're going to be at 3 dex, I think that doesn't really matter with either of the weapons that she has. So with that being said, I'm just going to throw Onyx an S. I don't really think I need to like harp on it too much or like, you know, be like, oh, this is, you know, people are going to disagree with this. I think that a lot of people are going to understand why I put Onyx in S, and I think that there's going to be, you know, a few people who are like, well, it doesn't even make sense. Like, Cannon's not that good. Like, this character isn't as crazy as people make him out to be. But I value Gauntlets a lot. I think Cannon definitely has a lot of properties that are good, and I think that the stats are really good, and the signature kit overall, even on Gauntlets, is strong as well. Okay, so if you watched Cody Travis play this legend, right, he played it in 2s with Micaiah, and he really showed like why this character, or the things about this character that are really good, right? The sniper shot D-Sig on guns is probably the highlight of this legend. The blaster N-Sig is also pretty good. I think, well, blaster side sig too, the whole blaster kit is overall really solid. I think though that the stats hurt this character so bad, man. And Lance itself is not in a great spot. I think though that the Lance Sigs, you could maybe argue that they're better than Orion. I think Vrax is definitely up there when it comes to the signature kit. It's just that I think the stats hurt him a lot. I will say though, when he has been good in the past, right? This character has been an easy S tier, but now I'm gonna say he's like a lower B. I don't necessarily want to say he's worse than Ada. I'm just gonna do this for sake of, because I don't like seeing him be at the bottom of B necessarily, but I do think he is lower A, mainly because of stats. Because if you want defense, you're gonna be running 3 strength, and then if you want another force, you know, you're gonna lose that dex, but that's probably the preferred stance. So yeah, it depends what you value, and it's Vrax. I haven't seen much Greatsword period, so it's kind of hard to really rank the Greatsword legends. I will say they did nerf J on N-Sig, and you can tell a little bit, but it's still a strong Sig, right? And they also nerfed the side Sig on Sword a while back, which was like massively, that thing was way too strong as well. The stats are still pretty good. The weapon combination, right? Nothing goes bad with Sword. So I'm going to say he's definitely like a higher A tier, but I don't really know just how good this legend can still be. Probably really good if you're playing him well, but with the Greatsword nerfs, with like the N-Sig change, which isn't probably that big of a deal, you know, I'm going to do a safe pick and say that he's high A. I'm not going to think too hard about this, right? I think that Mako is basically a direct upgrade when it comes to guitars compared to like a Suri. The signature kits are very similar, but I think that Mako just does it like a bit better compared to a Suri, right? So Greatsword, again, a lot of people don't think Greatsword's like this super awesome weapon, and I would agree. for the most part. I think it can have very high peaks, but I think in order to reach that, it's also pretty hard to get there. You're not going to be hitting these crazy strings all the time, and if you miss, you're going to probably get hit by, you know, like a Stomp Stare on Hammer, and then you're going to wonder why you're even playing Greatsword. So I will say that. The stats, though, are also really strong for this legend, and if you're a big guitar player, then I think this is a good legend to pick up right now. They nerfed Nash a bit, and you can tell, but I still think... Oh, well, he definitely got bumped down a tier, for sure. I think Nash is just a solid A tier pick now. I think in 2s, he's better than in 1s, definitely. The SIGs overall, right, they're still pretty good, and they hit pretty darn hard. And then his spear, I would say, is what really feels bad with, like, low dex, but you can run 4 decks if you really don't like that. And yeah, the stats themselves, I think, are pretty solid. I would say he's definitely probably an A tier in 2v2s. Maybe you could still say an S tier in 2v2s. But then when it comes to, like, 1s, if I could, like, split this up, I would say high A in 2s, but then I would definitely say, like, B in 1s. So I'm going to say this right now, right? The stats of Nye are the worst in the game. Worse than Jiro. But because Nye got buffs... I don't know if it was last patch. I think it was previous patches. She got buffs to, like... I actually think it was last patch. So she got, like, a Guitar Sig buff or something. But anyways... She has Delay Ensig on Spear, which people say is dodgeable. Still have never seen anyone dodge it, even though they say it's dodgeable. That alone, Delay Ensig on Spear, to me, is enough to keep her just above, like, mediocrity. I think it worse. If they took that away, if they took Delay Ensig away from her, I think she'd be, like, a C. And then if her Sigs had, like, no force, right, she'd probably be a D. But because she has, like, a Sig True combo, I think it's a valuable one as well. And the rest of her Sigs are also really good. I think that's enough to keep her from being just mediocre. Hattori definitely has seen better days, but at the end of it, I think right now, Hattori is not that bad of a pick. I think Hattori in 2s is great. I think Hattori in 1s is honestly really good as well. Nothing about her, though, just feels like off the wall crazy, right? You have some pretty good Sigs, I think, especially... I mean, on both of them. I think Ensig on Sword, if you can catch their dodge, you can do Delay Ensig. And then on Spear, I think all the Spear Sigs are actually really, really good. The stats even are not that bad. I think they're pretty good as well. Really high speed. Even if you take away a speed for defense, you're still going to be running what? You're going to be running 7 speed and then 5 defense. So that's pretty good. That's what I prefer when I play Hattori. Hattori's that legend where if you don't know what else to play in 2s and you want to play like Spear and you want to be like a supporting legend that can maybe get some earlier kills off of follow-ups, then you have Hattori there. So I'm going to say Hattori's just a solid A pick. So I have quite the disdain for Roland. I mean, I get why people think he's pretty good. I think his stats are actually pretty solid, and I think his sword kit is pretty good. The lance kit's kind of whatever to me. Man, Roland's just like... He has lance and sword. What else do you want me to say from him? Lance, sword, he's a knight in armor. Oh, he has high defense. Makes sense. Possibly the most boring and basic character that you could have. Literally a knight in shining armor. It's not even that shiny. It's like a knight in like dull armor. So yeah, Roland you can get value off of, but I don't know. I haven't seen many people play him. He can be good. I just don't like the character. That's a big reason why he's in C. If you think the sword kit's that good, then you'd probably bump him up to like B probably, but sword kit's really good. I will say that. Lance kit, you know, it has its moments, but other than that, this guy's just sitting in C. So this is really the only other legend I'll use this word to describe them. Straight corny. The hammer Sigs on Scarlet, if you're gonna like spam Sigs with a legend, I think Scarlet's actually fantastic for that. If you watched Winter Championship, I believe, then you saw Costlix basically do this all of the 2 set versus me and Cody, and it was quite insane because if you don't know how to play hammer, you can just do that. You can just do Ensig over and over again, and it's stupid. The D-Sig did get nerf on hammer. Very happy about that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think overall the kit is still really, really strong. Super high strength on both of the weapons, on Lance and Hammer, I think is really good. They nerfed the Ensig on Lance a while back, but I think that also is pretty good. Side Sig hits really hard on Lance, but I think you're not going to land it too often. D-Sig on Lance, though, is great over edge, and it also has some decent force behind it. So Scarlet. I don't really know. I mean, maybe legends with like sword and axe can do pretty well into Scarlet, but I think Scarlet's seen as that like alternative to Ulgrim in a lot of scenarios. If I could use one word to describe Magyar, I would say he's pretty niche. I'm gonna say he's above Roland. Why not? These are gonna be the only two legends in C. Very niche, super high defense. The Sigs don't really stand out too much. I just think, I don't know, I think Magyar is a cool legend though. That's probably a big reason why I'm putting them over Roland. But Greatsword, not in an insane spot. Again, you know, we know this. Hammer, in a pretty good spot, but the Sig kit overall for the character isn't the best. There definitely are better choices. If they did give buffs, I can see this legend definitely being like a staple, like, well, the go-to legend in 2s, maybe aside from Jaeon as far as like for Greatsword users. But yeah, all I'm gonna say about Reno's illegal right now. On release, I thought this legend wasn't that great. I thought, you know what, this legend's actually, they did a pretty good job balancing this legend. I think they did an okay job balancing the legend, but there's certain things about the Sigs, like the momentum you have, and honestly probably some of the force behind it, it doesn't make sense. This legend is probably the best legend in the game. It doesn't really matter if I think they are or not, because they haven't gone through a balance change, but let's just say for fun, you know, this character, if I could have another tier, I just put Reno in there and call them illegal, because, you know, on release characters are always going to be like either a step way above what they actually are going to be once they're viable and like allowed in competitive play, or they're going to be a bit below, maybe like Magyar, right? And they're going to get like buffs eventually. So yeah, that's where Reno is. All right, so that's the tier list. Again, remember, I only ranked the ones that I like specified, whether it was like, oh, high this or like low this tier. That's really the only time I ranked them. They're not like ranked inside orders or anything like that. So don't flame me in the comments for that. If I see that, I'm gonna be upset. I'm not gonna lie. But I hope you guys enjoyed. At the end of the day, remember, even Jiro is viable. You can play him. You can win games with him. Do I see him being played at the high level? Not really. Do I see myself playing anytime soon? Not really. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Peace, everyone.